Hey, what up? This is Mark.
This is Nitish.
We don't believe in introductions. Introductions are but to delay the inevitable.
At least we don't believe in planned, well-thought-out introductions.
Yes, we saw The French Dispatch, though.
By Wes Anderson?
Oh, yeah, obviously.
Yeah, with a name like French Dispatch, who else could it be?
Just like a look at the poster will tell you it's a Wes Anderson movie.
Yeah, if you smell the popcorn in the trash of something outside this theater, you know that the person eating it had just watched a Wes Anderson film. His style is that distinctive. So we're going to try a thing where I try to guess Mark's score and he tries to guess mine. Mark, I'm going to guess that you give this movie a 9.
Okay, why?
I think it's the kind of quirky beats that you love. I don't think a story needs to have a meaning for you. I don't think a story needs to have a super well thought out narrative the entire way through.
Thanks, buddy.
But I think it's enough for it to be a well written, artfully constructed piece that explores the medium the entire way through. And I think that's what this movie is.
Aw, thanks, buddy. That was actually sweet.
Yeah. You thought I was being a dick.
Well, then, Nitish, I predict you will rate this more or less an 8.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think you would say something like this is an aesthetically pleasing, if slightly shallow experience devoid of much meaning, but worth seeing regardless. I feel like it's not as though you don't associate worth with this movie. I think you do. It's just more you would reserve the higher points and like more higher accolades to something that has a little more like, I guess, oomph to the messaging or writing.
Okay, let's see where we're at. So I think you have some points that you want to start off with.
Yeah, no, I guess like my overall like sum up is it is an aesthetically pleasant experience that so happens to contain subtler quiet poignance. But of course I want to start with the obvious, which is the visuals of the movie. Naturally, it's a Wes Anderson movie, it's gonna look good, but I was not prepared for how good The French Dispatch looks.
It's amazing, guys.
It is the most Wes Anderson movie that has ever come out of Wes Anderson, and this is purely beneficial for me, the viewing audience. Everything from its 4:3, I think, aspect ratio, its photographish thing, the use of color and how sparing it can be, like, and the strong color choices when they do choose to go with it. Oops. And even like it. And how everything is staged, how every corner, the rules of Dre's are like maximally utilized here. It's like a series of beautiful paintings, and when they're in motion, it's like a series of sort of human Rube Goldberg machines.
Yeah, I think one of the things I wanted to double down on was the color. A lot of directors use this kind of naturalistic mode of color that just film what's in the environment, but you can tell that Wes Anderson is really filming these, I guess, with the color palette, with that color wheel in mind, trying to figure out which colors go best together, and he staged the entire shot around those. And I think maybe once I fall asleep I'll remember a director who did this slightly better, but to my mind right now I can't think of a director who uses color more cohesively than Wes Anderson.
I am inclined to agree. I think Wes Anderson at the very least used color most boldly out of any other. Fincher tends to come close, but like I feel like they're still more muted. Like Wes Anderson like really revels in the color for its own sake. Right. And again, I think this is purely beneficial. Sometimes, even if there's not much of an overall purpose to it, just like giving the audience an aesthetic treat, I feel like is worth it in of itself.
Right, and Anderson plays in these fuchsias and these meringues that you're not going to see in other movies because they're going to be like, you know, Zack Snyder-esque and like dark and depressing, but it feels like you're walking through a garden for a lot of these shots with how bright everything is.
Yeah, and vice versa. What I think is interesting is if Wes Anderson like really goes, or if Wes Anderson really pops off in terms of color and production design, especially those sets. I feel like he tends to use motion and movement a lot more sparingly compared to other directors. Light spoilers, but there is an animated sequence. I feel like most directors would just do live action, but like I feel like there's a point it almost sort of breaks the world of characters like moving around so much, right?
Yeah, it was almost as if he didn't want to film movement or film motion, and he instead decided to make that animated. As if the only physical animation of his movie was in an animated format.
Yeah, But like here, I also do think it kind of works because it creates a sort of emphasis on that sort of picturesque quality.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to revel in the image, and like there's just so many that comes to mind. There's one towards the middle with a jukebox, I think, or like at a diner that like it's very simple in how it's staged, at least at first, but it just really stands out in, like the simple ways like the characters are posed, and like how they take space, how they give space, and like where the color comes in. It's just beautiful, every frame of it.
And I guess I think that's a good segue to my point. A lot of directors of Wes Anderson's caliber film movies in a sort of naturalistic idea, in which they create this fully realized world filled with its own beauty, and the camera is a tool to distill, accentuate, and capture that beauty that is latent there. It's about filming motion. It's about filming a living, breathing world. In contrast, Anderson's film and in his camera seems to film a fully artificial world, one that is intentionally staged, and you can see the intention there. And in the shot that you mentioned, the jukebox, the yellow background is stripped away, just as you would an actual stage production, and you can see that there are sets. Over and over again, he films in a way that it makes it extremely clear that you're watching sets that have been constructed, and it's just delightful. It allows him to accentuate all of those brilliant things you were talking about with the colors and the contrasts, but it also generates this really quirky tone for the movie.
Yeah, this reminds me of a sort of anecdote I heard about like another Wes Anderson movie, The Fantastic Mr. Fox, a stop-motion animated movie, in which like people who are used to doing stop-motion were kind of confused with like Wes Anderson's insistence on making like the models out of real fur. They said like the fingerprints of the animators would get all up and it would be kind of obvious that it was like handmade. And Wes Anderson's response was basically like, good! I think he does not shy away from the sort of inherent artificiality of filmmaking. In fact, he relishes in it, and I feel like that's nice.
Yeah, in some ways, this is a film less about a French Dispatch, but a film about storytelling and myth-making, and the generation of a zeitgeist more than it is about the zeitgeist itself. I think it's the artificiality of every single shot is what allows this movie to thrive and what gives Wes Anderson his unique style, because he's creating something for you, and it's just like it's like one of those like delightfully created like edible arrangements.
Yeah,
or something
and it's
like
just
that.
for you. You feel special watching it.
Yeah, yeah. It's like a stage production that's elegantly staged, but with all of modern filmmaking's most extraordinary calibrations brought to bear on it.
You feel the blood, sweat, and tears into it, and they don't like wipe it away, and I think that's something to really be cherished. Just a sort of, filmmaking is hard, but it's impressive when they get it right. And sometimes I just want to be impressed by a movie, and like The French Dispatch really let me be impressed by it.
Yeah, but it's just because a lot of the blood, sweat, and tears in a lot of films go to making the camera seem like it's not there, right? Making it feel like what you're seeing is real life, but instead the blood, sweat, and tears in this movie go to making it as extraordinary and staged and like a facade as possible, and I think he pulls it off brilliantly.
Absolutely. And like this kind of leads into my point about the world building of The French Dispatch, because you're right, it is kind of like his filmmaking style. It is clearly artificial, clearly quirky, kind of for its own sake, almost ridiculous, yet I guess if I was to describe it in a vibe, the whole vibe of The French Dispatch and the fictional French town it creates, it's like that of a raggedy, well-worn, but familiar quilt that your grandma probably knitted who knows how long ago, but like, again, just for you.
Yeah.
And you still have it lying around your living room. And there's something really special about that. It makes you feel really familiar and almost nostalgic for the reporters, which is surprising considering it's so short runtime. By the end of the movie, when, well, I probably shouldn't give away much more than that, but I will say I felt nostalgic for the paper, and like I felt attached to the paper as though I was reading it my whole life.
Yeah, it almost feels, and it's weird because this movie is sneakily exposition heavy, but the entire time it feels in medias res, like you're just dropped into Ennui,
Yeah.
the city, and I'm not sure how he does that trick, but I think it has to do with the skill by which he writes everything. And I'll give away a little bit of features at the beginning of the movie. This isn't a big spoiler, trust me.
Yeah, right in the beginning.
Yeah. When he's giving an overview of the city of Ennui, he's doing so as a reporter from the French Dispatch, voiced by Owen Wilson. Wow. And
oh, that was Owen Wilson.
that was Owen Wilson.
Lightning McQueen.
Yeah. And it's
Ciao.
yeah, it's like a reporter telling the story of their old haunts, and the editor goes and quibbles with him about the exposition he's giving, so it's a little too dreary, and then the reporter says, no, it's real and grimy, and there's this back and forth about it that makes it feel real, even though again it's super artificial.
Yeah, absolutely. But there does feel it does really feel like there's something real about this movie.
Yeah.
This is, I don't know what this says about me, but some way or another, like, I got signed on to the French Dispatch newsletter, so to speak, which is like, basically every week I would get an email from the French Dispatch newspaper, like with a new cover and like a little snippet of a story that I now know is from the movie. And for the longest time I just thought I must have looked up the movie and subscribed to the actual newsletter. I did not know until like a few weeks ago when I actually clicked on one of the articles when I found out the French Dispatch wasn't even a real magazine. This movie wasn't based off of anything real. Everything is completely fictional, made up, but so engrossing that even in real life, seeing these newsletters saying this marketing stunt, I believed it.
Yeah, I think the way in which it feels real and is the way that a story your mother tells you when you're a child is real. It feels real in the same way that a picture book is real. It captures this element of childlike joy and discovery and exploration of a world that is curated for your amusement. And in that way, it's able to draw out these moments of humanity that are just perfect. Two of my favorite parts of the film come, and they're, again, very clearly staged. There's no, they're just he tells you he's going to tell you a deep quote, and then he tells you a deep quote. But it's a deep quote, and it feels lovely, and it feels like the coda of an old storybook I'd read. I think the grandmother's quilt analogy is perfect because it feels well worn and snug and perfectly fitting.
Yeah, I came out of this movie and I was just smiling. I had a good time. I felt warm inside, just positive vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's able to capture a sense of meaningfulness even as it's so clearly stilted, which is just a balancing act that is impressive.
I have heard a little buzz about this movie that it's just aesthetic for aesthetic's sake. It's just it's just a nice experience, but it doesn't mean anything. I would like to push back on that. I actually think there is a lot of meaning to the French Dispatch. That at least screams out to me, or at least I can kind of relate as a at least wannabe writer.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I just think it does it in much subtler and quieter means than most other films, but I think that doesn't make it any less impressive. My sort of idea is that the French Dispatch is an ode not only to reporters, but to the written word in general.
Yeah.
It's sort of interested in what the written word has to say, what it can convey, what it can't, and the beauty in its sort of limitations to a certain extent, and what emotions it can make you feel. It does it in an interesting way. Film is a visual medium, but through a visual medium, it's kind of propping up a fictional written platform.
Yeah.
I was actually talking with a friend of ours, back at my apartment, afterward, and he had a very good point. about the use of color that kind of blew my mind, but I think says a lot about the movie. Because, like, at first you assume, like, it's black and white when it's depicting stuff from the past and color when it's depicting stuff from the present. But towards the beginning, there's a little split screen thing with past and present, and sometimes they switch it.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of lets you know immediately that's not the case. We're not going to do that.
Yeah.
So, what is it? I think the best theory I've found is that they use color to kind of convey the parts that can't exactly be conveyed just through words.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think the biggest example we see of that is there's a scene where Jeffrey Wright's character is describing a banquet, and you see the black and white muted shots of the food being passed out on the right and them enjoying the food, and then you see these immaculately framed like food magazine art style photos of the food on the left in full color, and that contrast of the color being something that is just not graspable or not it's inapprehensible by the written word as something that transcends the written word. It can be imitated, it can be attempted to you can attempt to capture it, but you really can't capture its entire beauty. I think is just a brilliant contrast in the film.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think I'm of the belief that a movie doesn't need to say a lot to, like, warrant its existence, but I do think the movie does say quite a bit, just from a more meta level. I feel like it comments on a lot of things I appreciate. It's just like, I want to read journalistic stories and nonfiction stories after this, because like, that in of itself is an art.
Yeah. It feels like an ode to odes, or like a film about film, a story about stories. It's just great. Like, I miss it already. I will say it's like that might be a little frustrating to folks because it feels a little self-aggrandizing maybe, but I will say that even though it very clearly is like Wes Anderson maybe thinking a bit highly of himself.
Yeah, I mean, it's Wes Anderson, when is he not?
Right. This movie is so fun. The dialogue is snappy and just fiendishly clever. One of my favorite lines from the film is, I think, self-reflection is a vice best carried out in private, if at all. Which, like, just everybody in the theater just started laughing at. The delivery is fantastic. The actors are fantastic. Nobody gives these like deep, tortured performances that you might that are standard Oscar fare currently, but everybody just is charismatic and engrossing, and you just keep wanting to hear more. I think what makes the power of the written word so potent here, the message that Wes Anderson is trying to deliver, if I guess perhaps message is maybe too organized a concept for what comes out in this film, but the reason I think this film is successful is because it's so fun and beautiful that you really do feel the power of the word. You really do feel the power of the narration as it's being brought out to you.
Yeah, it's like, I feel like there's a meaning to eating a very, like, masterfully done meal.
Yeah.
Even if you can't, like, directly, like, explain it or, like, apply it.
Yeah.
I feel like it's the same with this movie.
Yeah.
So overall, what are your final thoughts?
You were pretty close. I'd give it an 8.4.
Ooh, 8.4.
I think it's an ode to storytelling. I loved it a lot. It's just that I've seen odes to storytelling before, and although this is exceptional and I loved it and I really enjoyed it and it's definitely worth watching, I do think that higher scores should be reserved for something a little more transformative.
Nice. You were close too. I would probably give it I wouldn't be 9.4 to be cheeky, but I'm teetering between 9 or 9.5, but I think I'm going to go with 9.5 because I can see this movie over time being bumped up to a 10 for me.
Yeah.
It's exactly my kind of thing, but I feel like there's just so much to appreciate, and I just vibe with this movie so hard. It's definitely one of my favorites of the year.
Yeah, it's a great vibe the entire way through.